Connemara is an extraordinary place, a place of outstanding beauty, rugged, primal, rich in history and culture. Until the Tudor plantations of the 16th and 17th centuries, this land was one of the last bastions of true Celtic autonomy. Even today, the granite hills and waterlands are as spellbinding and dominant as ever. Beyond the rushes on the shores of Loch Corrib stands Currariva House, home to Harry and June Hodgson. This spring, Currariva is entering its 6th decade as a guest house.
I start around 5 o'clock in the morning, but I enjoy the mornings, I must admit, because I have the house to myself, and I do like the house too. And I can usually have it to myself for about 2 hours, 2.5 hours before the staff and guests start. Equally, it gives me a chance to run around and get on with my own things, because once the day starts, I have to, I suppose, be all things to all men, and answering bells and trying to cook at the same time, direct everybody around the place. Guests normally prefer to stay at a country house rather than a hotel, I think because they have the one-to-one effect with the people who actually own the house. There's also, more than anything else, a sense of tranquility, less a sense of loads and loads of people around the place. Basically, it's just ourselves, possibly about 10 guests around most of the time. Quite a lot of the time there's only 2 or 3 people around. I think it's essentially the reason that the guests stay with us is because they're looking for peace and quiet and getting away from it all. Because our guests will go out on the lake, they generally like to spend the day out on the lake, so they will take a picnic because they will land on an island, build a fire and have their picnic. We have guides or gilly is the word we use actually. It's an old Celtic Scottish word. It means a man who knows the lake and knows his way around, and he comes and brings them out in the boats.
How are you doing?
With Currariva situated right on the shores of Loch Corrib, June, Harry and their guests have access to some of the best fishing and boating waters in the country. Corrib spreads out over 68 square miles and is renowned for freshwater trout, salmon and pike. With the gillies' help and maybe a little luck, a few might feature on the menu this evening. Faced with the unpredictable Atlantic, the seafarers of Connemara have relied for centuries on a unique sailing craft, the traditional Galway hooker.
Colm has been building boats ever since he was a teenager, since he left school with his father. His father built the fishing boats, and Colm has been working with boats ever since, on and off. But this is the first time that he had the opportunity to build a full new boat. But he worked at rebuilding the old ones. That took most of his working life, actually, rebuilding the old Galway hookers. And so he was very, very aware of not only what he wanted to do himself, but what the old people wanted to do when they built boats. In other words, he read their concepts from the rebuilding of the old boats. So he had it all, you could say, from the past and the present. It's an art form because if you see those kind of people working, people like Colm, they're very relaxed and very calm if everything is right. But if they're not happy, they actually stop working. They can't work. They have to have inspiration like an artist. And those kind of boats, when you build them a one-off, it's a one-off expression. This place was always associated with sailing, and people used to come to visit. So we decided to do the boat for tourism because that would justify the expense of building a boat. And at the same time, it creates an opportunity for people like Colm to show their craft again. Well, they're unique to Galway Bay, I think. And there's a lot of discussion about where they got the name Galway hooker. But there's two distinct types of Galway hookers. They're 36-foot size, say on average, where they carry turf to the Aran Islands and the limestone areas of Clare and so on, and cattle in that as well. But then there was 40 foot, up to 45 foot, like the Ark and the Marianne and those old ones. And they carry provisions nearly always. And it is on those that we based our design concept.
Ito aquí un poco gairi. Okay.
Further along the coast is the fishing village of Roundstone, home to musician and master bowron maker Malachi Kearns.
The bowron probably originated as a skin tray used on the bog for moving peat to the main road running through the bog because wheels would sink. So goatskin is tough and durable and it was available. So it may have originated as a frame tray and the beater or tipper is used for that. Probably originated as the leg of a sheep, a bone. I lived beside one of the chieftains, Paddy Mercier. He was the bowron player with the chieftains. And I come from a very musical background as well. Michael Coleman was a famous Irish fiddler. He'd be a cousin of mine as well. And I also loved the sound of the bowron. The way it always connected with me, the beat, that haunting sound. So I stayed with it then and had a go at making. It was an opportunity to live in the west of Ireland. Manual percussion is rapidly growing now rather than synthesized sound in all music, areas of music, not only traditional music. It's a huge growth area. The critical part of a bowron is quality goatskin. So the stretch properties of goatskin are unique, the way it stretches. and it holds its tension. We pre-stretch the skins first and with heat, and that just makes the skin very manageable to finally stretch it onto the 18-inch frame. The skin will always react to the temperature, the conditions, and if it's very hot, the skin will tighten a lot, and there'll be a very high-pitched, pingy kind of sound. But if you dampen the skin with a few teaspoons of water or beer or good champagne or whatever you like, give it a few minutes, and it'll come back down to that deep, haunting sound. We decorate the skins with Celtic designs or Celtic initials from the Book of Kells. My wife does. Yeah, when we finish with putting them on, the designs will last longer than we will. That's part of the culture with frame drums, is to decorate them, yeah. In the hands of a skillful player, the bodhrán, the sound of it, that racing sound, it's a haunting racing sound, it connects very well with most people. It touches the spirit. It's very beautiful as an accompaniment to traditional folk music.
Clifton, the town they call the capital of Connemara, has always had a colourful way of protecting its walls from erosion by the salty Atlantic breezes. Unlike most other Irish towns, Clifton didn't expand gradually with the passage of time. It was actually founded lock, stock and barrel in the year 1812 by one John Darcy. The fairy tale facade of Kylemore Abbey is one of the great beauty spots of Connemara. Once the private residence of a wealthy Victorian MP, the vast pile is now the Benedictine convent of the Irish Dames of Ypres, who run a school there.
The abbey was built in 1868 by an Englishman, Mr. Mitchell Henry, for his wife Margaret Vaughan from the north of Ireland. He had a lot of tragedy in his life. They were a very happily married couple, but Mrs. Mitchell Henry went on a holiday to Cairo and contracted Nile fever and died. And we are told that after her death he lost interest in a lot of things and suffered from depression and so forth. And I suppose, you know, the cumulative effect of all of these tragedies was that he felt perhaps it was better to move away from a place he had been so happy and now was suffering so much. Henry built the castle originally in 1868. He decided he needed a family chapel, and so when buying the materials to build his house, he also bought materials to build the house of God. So we reckon that pretty close to 1868, work on this little chapel commenced. It's a beautiful Gothic church, as you can see. It's a very interesting thing about it. I think it incorporates marble from Armagh, from Connemara, from Kilkenny, and I believe there's a bit here from Cork as well. It suffered greatly, as you can understand, from the climate here. We have got a lot of rain in winter time and a lot of growth, rhododendron and other trees growing very close to the church, so it had suffered greatly from that. Erosion of one kind or another, and the church itself was so depleted that it became dangerous and we had to close it up. And many visitors to the house and grounds were horrified because they loved the little chapel, and so did we. And as Benedictines, we like to have a house of worship open to the public. And so work commenced about 2 years ago. Fundraising of all kinds commenced, and little by little we've got it to where it is today.
Before Kyle was built, the land at Currariva was discovered to be rich in lead and copper, both of which were in great demand. The Hodgsons, who had control of the mining rights, prospered until the seams dried up in the 1860s. Way ahead of their time, the family attempted to supplement their income by opening Currariva to paying guests.
My grandfather started it, really, back in 1900. We have a brochure, as you probably saw actually, which was dated 1900. And I don't think it was much of a success, because we never found a brochure for 1901, we say. But then my parents tried again back in the late 30s, just before the war. And we've just really kind of followed on from there. Bengal tiger, that was shot by a great uncle who was in the colonial service and spent all his life out in the Far East, all his purposes, both India and Burma. And he kind of brought them back, and they've been left here. Though there's one tiger's head, which was over the mantelpiece in the hallway there. And at the age of about 70, he married again. And he married a kind of 30-year-old who cycled him around Connemara, and he finally dropped dead. And she came back to collect both the tiger head above the mantelpiece and the one on the wall. And my father wasn't at all happy about this, so he gave her a ladder, and she got the tiger head down, but she couldn't get the skin down. That's the only reason we have it still, I think. My father's at Cambridge University, and he's a highly qualified engineer. He had to come home, and the only way he could think of to keep the place going was by taking in, as were known as PGs in those days. And he started up, and this was before the war, and then during the war, various relations of hers used to come over, because we had the same kind of rationing problems as they had in the UK. And they used to come over, and actually that's really how it started, because my father got a bit fed up with this. And the more they came over and the longer they stayed, he decided, well, we're going to charge them for it. And that's really how the whole thing kind of got off the ground. And it took off from there, thank God.
If old Mr. Hodgson's efforts to develop tourism at the turn of the century were slightly less than successful, the revival of Currariva as a wartime guest house was an instant hit, offering both luxury and an escape from the constraints of the dreaded ration book. The strains of Glenn Miller on the old Philips valve wireless. At the turn of the century, another pioneer of communications, the Marconi Company, came to Clifton and built themselves a wireless station. From here, on the 17th of October 1907, the very first commercial wireless messages were sent and received from the United States. In its time, the station was hailed as a technological triumph and employed a full-time staff of 150. Eventually, though, time ran out. The station was closed and the bogland fell silent again. But not for long. On June 15th, 1919, this same stretch of Connemara coastline was once again the focus of the world media.
I was getting ready Sunday morning for Sunday school, and I heard this promotion on the street, and I rushed down and I looked out and I saw this plane coming down the street, very, very low, and it circled the town twice. Then it disappeared. And I went off to Sunday school. And when I came home, my father had a pony and trap to drive us out to see this plane. Anyhow, we came out, we walked up the line here, and as we were walking down here, my father met two country farmers, and my father said to him, "Well, Pat, did you see the plane?" "I did, sir." He said, "It's a hell of a yoke, it's over here." So I rushed in front of my parents, and I saw the plane, and I came back, and I said to my father, I said, "The hell of a yoke is here, it has no wheels." Didn't mean anything to me. It's the first time I ever saw the plane. I didn't know anything about it, you know. I was curious. I was more interested in the soldiers guarding the machine and the crowds and the excitement, you know. The plane, it meant nothing to me. It didn't sink in, you know, what was happening. We didn't realize what a wonderful feat it was.
News of Alcock and Brown's epic 16-hour crossing of the Atlantic echoed round the world, and the world arrived in Connemara yet again. Today, of course, life goes on as if nothing had ever happened.
We nearly always have somebody staying who has been with us before, and invariably there's more than one. It's usually 5, 6, 7, usually probably half the house at times. The problem is, of course, that we get very involved with them, so I have to spend a lot of time talking and obviously telling them what's happened.
No better person.
Thanks a lot. And telling them what's happened to the children and where they're going and what we've done last winter and what improvements we've tried to make with the house. And yes, it's very rewarding, of course, to know that people like to come back. I would like to keep it as we have it, which is the fact that people come down and sit in the drawing room, sit in the study and chat to each other, sit in the front hall, and after dinner sit around the fire and talk to each other.
It's very old-fashioned. I mean, we are frequently told it's like a time warp. You know, you come up the avenue and you're back almost in Victoriana age, which, well, I like, and I think you quite like, actually.
As Curra Riva celebrates the end of another century, Harry and June have good reason to look back fondly at the history of the old place. And like the landscape around it, very little has changed.